Josh Klein from the Riot Report. Just about you're here in Charlotte. You're a new player.
Mhm.
What does it mean to be a part of this Panthers Player Impact Committee as a new Panther, and have your voice be someone to try and lead?
It's great. I was a part of the same committee that we had in Minnesota. Um, that was just started last year. It was 7 players at the end and 1 coach. Um, so I'm familiar with having a player-led group with the sole purpose of social justice. In Minneapolis, it was anything around social justice we could be involved in. So it feels good to join that same type of committee here.
I was hoping that maybe you could just expound on what your feelings are about what's happening in the country and the world right now, and how you think things could get better in the future.
Sweet. Okay, so when you talk about getting better, I've given it a lot of thought, and I think it's a 3-pronged approach. Right now, the immediate future and the long-term future, and so protest in regards to that. For me personally, I believe that is done to show that you're not being heard, that there is a problem, and that you won't tolerate it. And so you see a lot of protests when it happens. You see indictments happen, and then you see charges filed and then charges bumped up, right? So then protest. I feel like while protest is going on to get these things to happen, you also have the ear of those who could potentially create change on a local level. So I feel like that's where we're at now. Yes, the other officers were indicted and the charge was moved up to 2nd degree. But then also, I think it is important for each individual community to make action items to take to their local police to say, hey, listen, like, we've noticed these problems and these are solutions that we have come up with, and we would like to partner with you to have these come to fruition. And I think that's where we're at now. And then the long term is just like when I got here, I was so happy the Panthers brought it up, voter registration. There's a lot of elections going on like now in the coming weeks. I know we have one in Georgia. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, in case y'all didn't know, on the 9th. So it's about getting people registered and to know that the decisions you make in the booth can affect long-term legislation. And so I feel like that's what's next, to put in place templates to help the next 6 months to a year, and then elect the people that can make a positive impact for years to come.
Stephen, Elena Getzenberg, Charlotte Observer. I was wondering, having just spent so much time in Minneapolis, what it's like for you to watch everything that's happening there.
My time at Minneapolis, I was just talking to someone else about it, is crazy because I can actually see how Minneapolis has responded between 2 unarmed Black deaths. I got there shortly after Philando Castile was killed in North Minneapolis, and I left. When I left the next week, George Floyd was murdered. And so my time there was like booking. And it's just sad when some people don't see why. Because I was thinking, and someone brought up to me, and I keep thinking about the quote that was said to me. What if people just, I'm trying to remember, but I'm a paraphrase it, but basically someone brought up to me that Cap taking a knee was just another way without protest. Like, what if there was another way to get everyone in the country to talk about one topic at once without a single thing being damaged? And that moment 4 years ago, it was taking a knee. And then we just took it and we went the complete wrong way with it. And we didn't open up dialogue and we didn't have discussion, and we kind of swept under the rug and tried to go back to our normal everyday. And now we're here. But we are here. And I feel like the stage is set for us to take that next step. I am happy because now 4 years later, since 2016, I think that it's moving in the right direction. Like, no one is allowing it to be swept under the rug. And I think that shows tremendous growth. And I think it's important that we talk about sustainability and movements. And yeah, so sustainability is the biggest thing I've seen. That's a big difference.
Based on your answer, you sound, for lack of a better word, hopeful that change can be sparked. And unfortunately, it comes off of the incident in Minneapolis is kind of the tipping point, but this is not a new thing. But as we look at going down the road, you seem hopeful that what's happening now can have a lasting impact and make an impact and affect some change.
Yeah, absolutely. To be out here every day and to think that, oh, nothing's going to come from it, or to think that, oh, hopefully it just passes over, is like short-sighted, narrow-minded. It's reckless thought in my head. It's like, all right, all this is happening and people are listening. I have had so many people text me and ask, what can I do to help? And I'm like, this is amazing. Like, people want to help. So I keep telling them, all right, it's multifaceted. There's multiple fronts. If you feel like there are a lot of people protesting, what can you do to help with like action items? What does your election landscape look like? Who are the people that are arguing and fighting and champion messages for the people that aren't being heard? What do they need, right? And so guiding everyone in the right direction is good. And you actually see forces mobilizing to see these things get done. That's why I'm so hopeful. So yeah, there is hope. I am hopeful. I would hope something changes. You know what I mean?
Stephen, I'm curious, with your grandma's background, working for Maynard Jackson, trying to, fix the criminal justice system way back in the 70s, does she think there's been improvement?
The conversations I have with my grandma are always great. No, long story short, no. And it was because of that factor. It's because sustainability. It's because we get angry, we get frustrated, we voice our outrage, and when it's not heard, then protests happen, and then something is done, and then we're pacified. But anyone who has kids know, I don't have kids, which is a crazy thing for me to say, but like, people who have kids know, like, pacifiers aren't solutions. Right? It's a temporary fix. So that's why she doesn't think that anything has changed really in regards to long-term solutions, something that won't come up in a year, won't come up in 5 years, right? But she, along with me, is hopeful. I told my grandma about the calls and the meetings we have here with the Carolina Panthers and what we have in the works, and she seems genuinely hopeful just like me. So I'm excited.
Stephen, you say that you're hopeful. How do you feel then yesterday after Drew Brees makes the comments that he did?
I'm not completely up to date with that. I've been swamped with stuff here. So I can't make an informed statement on that. Sorry.
Stephen, what's it been like coming into, I mean, obviously, it's been different. You haven't been able to meet everyone, but Andre and Chris mentioned how Shaq Thompson stepped up to be a leader. From who you've met and who you've talked to, and with David Tepper, how has it been with this organization you've seen addressing these issues on and off the field so far?
It's tough because everything's virtual for right now, and I feel like in an actual physical locker room is when you would actually see what everyone was like without like the coaches watching. But I do see there is leadership, there is strong leadership, and one thing I did like that everyone here has talked about on these interviews was that Coach Rule and David Tepper and their support that they showed. Minnesota was the same in regards to the ownership, the Wilfs, but here was outstanding. For too long, I mean, myself personally, everyone said at some point they felt like this. At some point in your career, you had to choose between being a football player and being Black. Like, something just came up, and I'm going to have to choose. Either I'm going to voice my outrage with this thing that's a racial injustice and potentially jeopardize my career. And I know for a fact I've chosen to not say anything in fear of like something bad happening to my career. But for Coach Rule to come out and at least unprompted and say like, this is how he feels about it, that it is okay for you to go out and show, tweet whatever you want, get behind any message that you feel is right, and that don't fear that we're going to say anything. You have your own platform. Speak your truth. That speaks bounds. That was amazing. And so with that, I just dove head in and instantly asked to join the player impact committee. And when you have someone like that behind you and the head coaches behind you, you can really, really do your job as an organization to facilitate change in the city, for sure.
Stephen,
in both Carolinas.
I'm sorry, when did that conversation with Rule take place? Was it when you signed, or was it just sometime over the past week?
Last week? Early last week? Yeah.
He had mentioned to us yesterday that there was a day when he had, before any of this had surfaced, he was going to have a comedian come join the Zoom,
Mm-hmm.
and he said that wasn't appropriate, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think was it that same day? You think that
It was? Yep.
But could you just expand a little bit on that, and then and also, as you said, Tepper's role?
Well, what was the last part? Sorry, it cut out.
It maybe speak to about any interactions you've had with David Tepper on social justice issues and racial justice.
I haven't had any personal interactions with him, just from what the head coach has told us from his personal conversations with him. But on that day, I believe the day before, we spoke in our position group as a defensive line just about how everyone feels, like, mentally. One more thing I like here is the emphasis on player mental health. And so obviously there's a lot going on between a lot of players in the locker room. So we took the time to address it in individual groups. And then coach then took the next day to then decide that it's not the time for fun and games and jokes, and that we can always come back to that. But right now there are some people who are experiencing some hurt, and it's best if we give them the space and opportunity to express how they feel, to give other people who may not have a direct connection to it a chance to connect. And I hear a lot of you all out there asking questions like, how can you get other people to understand? It's taking the time to get to know someone will help you connect and try to understand where they're coming from, right? And so someone comes to me and says, I don't understand what the big deal is. Well, like, okay, tell me about you. Tell me where you grew up, how you experience things. I'm gonna run some scenarios by you and tell me how would you respond and react. And once I understand where you come from, then I can say, okay, cool. In that same situation I just hypothesized to you, this is how I was treated. Do you see how that's different? Do you see how that's not fair? So that's how I pointed out. So, like, if I want someone to understand me, I must first understand them and where they're coming from. And then when I identify that disconnect, then I try my best to bridge it. And I feel like that's exactly what Coach did. And it spoke bounds about the man that he is, honestly.
Sean, David Newton with ESPN.com. You mentioned the mental health emphasis there. I know Tish Karen, the mental health kind of doctor there, is on maternity leave. But did Minnesota have somebody like that in place? And what's it say to you that the Panthers have that type person in place? And how important is that?
It's everything. Mental health, everyone knows what's between your ears can affect you in all sorts of ways. I can't go out there and do my best to help bring a championship to this city, to this team, to this organization if my head isn't on right. And so Minnesota had it. We had a team of 3 doctors that we can go and talk to at any point in time. And we also had our head of player relations as kind of like a liaison between us and the head coach. Is someone that we could talk to and have completely candid conversations with. And if we needed help and needed a message relayed to the coach, he was a lot easier at doing that. And to have that set up here means that the team understands and values the importance of mental health, which is always a good sign. They care about you as more than just a body on the field to make plays.
And another question here too. I know they talked about community relations with police there. How did you view relations with police in Minnesota when you were there, and how can that help you, and what the goal is of this committee here?
It was strained, and it was a lot of past traumas that were never addressed. And so imagine 2 people who both have negative interactions with the other group, and then 2 people who just represent those groups happen to meet up. They're going to take all those past like run-ins into it. So it's like, did you just say this or did you say something else? Is this like this or like this? But that it just kept compounding and compounding and compounding. And where we can come in as an organization is work as basically a mediator. And so an example, I say community relations. One particular thing that could help would be to like bring uniformed police officers to already scheduled Panthers events in full uniform. And so that allows young children to see these police officers in their communities. So then when they happen to come by for a police thing in the community, they don't see, oh, that's officer badge number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's Officer Johnson, right? She's my T-ball coach. Or that's Officer Taylor. Like, he he is the football coach, right? Like, so they have interactions with these people that's more than just what's portrayed on social media, which is never positive, right? So like that right there, the next generation already has a better foundation for healthy relationships with the police, and then vice versa, right? Now they get to interact with people in the communities they protect, right? So they don't see this person as a threat, but as, you know, so-and-so, like he was on my T-ball team, right? I saw him when he grew up, and I was there and picked him up when he got his first A, right? I taught him how to throw a curveball, right? It's like you have connections and they have connections with you. And I feel like that's just a better foundation for positivity moving forward. One example, we have a bunch. We're working on a bunch. So,
Stephen, Steve Reed from the Associated Press. If I could change gears just for a second, I wanted to ask you the same question that Joe had asked Chris. 5 players at Alabama, I guess, have tested positive for coronavirus. How concerning is that as a player, or are you approaching this as you got to take your chances, you got to get out of this bubble at some point? What is kind of your take as a player in getting back on the field here as we go forward?
My immediate thing is, were they not tested before all players returned to campus? So that I have a problem with that logistically, because I can't figure out, okay, how did the virus get to campus? I'm assuming that when you told the players to come back, it was also a come in at this time, get swabbed, go back to a hotel room, and do not return until we get your results. Once everyone is cleared, then everyone can be in the same room. I hope they didn't just tell all the kids to come back and then start doing football and we'll test you as you're here, because that does not make sense. So I hope when we come back, it is the same protocol. Get tested. Once you're cleared, then you can be released back in the general population. That creates small bubbles or pockets of like immunity between the teams. Then we can have practices together. And then once, things keep going, I think we will have football. Fans may or may not be a part of it, depending on how the curve looks. But I do think that better logistics will lead to football being played on a professional level this upcoming season.
Stephen, I do have a question for you, and this is Deshawn with the ABC News. Welcome. I heard you say a little earlier about just being told that you would have to choose between being a football player and being Black. I'm curious how long you carried that with you, and what was the catalyst which made you feel comfortable to be both?
Up until last year, so the first 3 years of my league, and it came with the first time an owner came in and addressed the team and said, "We support you." And that was with the Wolves. And to come to another team where the same position, the owner said, "I support you. And I see what you experience as being of concern." I don't have to choose anymore. I can be both. I can go out and get these numbers and do what I can to help bring back a championship, but then also express my grievances as a Black man. And those two shouldn't interfere with the other. And it feels good. It allows me to play free. It allows me to play less stressed, which in turn makes me a better football player. So it all works out in the end. But it was last year, to answer your question, and it took an owner saying that I support you.
Just to follow up on that quickly, how prevalent do you think that is amongst some of your peers, other guys in the league still carrying that weight or even that concern?
It's tough. It's heavy. It's not okay. No lie, I called my mom and talked about it because I said it's not fair. But to those who do feel that way, I think it's, if you're on a team or you can be bigger than that, part of an organization, you feel like your leadership isn't supporting of it, I feel like now is the time that we can go in and have conversations and try to get that person to try to understand your plight, and an honest attempt at it. There's nothing wrong with that. Maybe the same template that I use, which is try to get to know them, try to ask questions. No one likes being talked at, finger wagged in their face, but to come in and ask questions, try to be penetrating, try to be deeper, and then find that disconnect and then try to bridge it, I think could help. So I feel like that's a conversation other people could use with their organization, team, what have you, so that they can, feel free to be both an athlete and a minority.
Steven, did the kind of the history of David Tepper over the past couple of years and even Matt Rule and his relationship with players, did that weigh into your decision to come to Carolina?
I did hear a handful of things. So actually, Coach Rule like whooped up on us at Vanderbilt, like a season opener, a couple like in college. So I've known him from then. But yeah, just like going through and just so happens he was a coach at Baylor when Vanderbilt played them before he came to Carolina. So I was able to make some connections and ask what kind of coach he was. So I was aware of it, that he was like a players coach, I guess you can say, more in tune with the players and made a more like concerted effort to make a connection with them. So yes, that did weigh in when I learned of that he wasn't just going to be X's and O's and chalk talk. So yes.
All right. Does anybody else have any last questions for Steven?
Steven, are you in Charlotte?
I am. Yeah, I just moved here like 17 days ago.
I would ask you how you thought, what you think so far, but I'd imagine it's
my street is beautiful. Thank you for asking. No, I haven't really been anywhere with COVID and just trying to get situated in a new city.
What was it like moving during all this?
It wasn't bad. I was actually super excited because I thought we were going to get started on the 18th of May. But I have an amazing assistant, and she basically set up the whole house for me in 24 hours. And I'm all about delegating to people who are more than capable. And so I put it in her hands, and she hit a home run. So it was seamless for me.